and it's kind of parallel with our design process in general. So it's important, we start out with having really solid requirements for your prototype. So like getting from the benchtop, you got your requirements, you're designing tests to figure out how to test your requirements. So an example would be, what's the maximum amount of force that's necessary to apply to this particular implant so it doesn't fracture? And then you kind of characterize your device. And a lot of startups, especially when you're looking into the investors and timelines and pressure, they shorten the characterization time. I highly recommend do not do this, because I've seen even in corporate companies kind of fail because they do not do enough testing, not just for meeting the standards like the ISO 13485, but also for testing all the different use conditions. So typically you kind of test and characterize, and you add fixes to your design, and then finally you get into design verification. So you have your finalized design inputs, and you're showing very clearly in this document that your product will meet with a specific level of confidence all of what you're saying is going to meet. So you're going to showing that data that ties back to the design inputs. And a lot of the time, design verification is what the FDA sees. If you mess up during it, if you didn't characterize properly, you're going to have to redo it and explain why you messed up and why you had to redo it. So you go through that, and we determine levels of confidence in their statistical capability metrics, and with attribute data, it's usually like 29 samples for 90%, 59 for 95, and then 299 for 99%. And obviously, we might not have the time to test 299 for every single design input. So you have to justify why you're testing a certain amount for each requirement. And a lot of the time that ties to risk. So you do kind of a risk assessment there. So like at our stage right now, we're getting ready to go into design verification. We're trying to like button up everything, get our reports together. We have our risk assessments done. So that's where we're having these Q subs very clearly and saying, hey, our equipment, our device, very, very expensive, small patient population at this moment. We can't test the 59, but is it okay if we do 15? And they approved it. So it's kind of like you come with a proposal, like you were saying, and then they say yes or no, and then they give the reasons instead of being like, we can't afford, we don't have the time to do 59 or 299 or whatever. So
can you touch on the value though? I want to double click on risk assessment, because sometimes it feels like a pain, but actually I think it's some of the best time invested.
yes.
So that you can anticipate things, risks before FDA or before you see it pop up in the field.
100%. So, especially having worked in the corporate field, you would think that everyone thinks through all the risks available or possible, but that's not true. Like observations do happen out, patients get hurt, it's a real possibility. So a method that we use is called an FMEA, a failure modes effects analysis, and you have a design one and a process one. And this is applicable to software product as well. If you're using software as a medical device, you need to have a full risk assessment on that software as well. And you're pretty much going to look at all your design inputs, the design features and functions, what could possibly go wrong, and then you kind of look at the different kind of areas, parts of the design that can fail, whether it's a mechanical failure or electrical or software. You outline it all. It's a team effort. It's very tedious, but it's very important. And then after you're done with the FMEA, you highlight you rank them as like 4 or 5 severity, the riskiest pieces of the design that could result in severe patient harm or patient death. And then you really focus on what can we do, what other controls can we add to our design to mitigate that from ever happening. So an example would be, like with our surgical instrumentation, we get very dangerously close to the brainstem. So if we touch that, person is dead. So we have controls in place, like the way that we set it up to really minimize that motion to almost like the millimeter amount so that it doesn't touch the brainstem. And there's other design controls that come back in that respect. But yeah, risk assessment, very critical. A lot of first-time founders don't really think it through thoroughly, so it's really useful to have consultants like Jessica to advise on that.